Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Jessica Kelly. Jessica is the founder and the CEO of Threefold, which is a fashion tech platform which connects brands with ethical factories around the world and manages their production all in one place. In doing so, they help to build brands for people, planet, and profit. I actually met Jessica a year ago, I think it was now, at an event to support survivors of human trafficking. And we actually started getting into the conversation about trafficking. And Jessica told me what she did with fashion and how ethical fashion and conscious consumerism and fair trade actually has an impact in fighting human trafficking and labor trafficking in particular. And that kind of opened up my eyes to a whole other realm of how our daily lives are connected to whether human trafficking is supported or stopped. So I'm just so excited to have Jessica here with us today and to explain a little more about what she does and what some of the habits that we can just be aware of to create a better world for everyone, as well as to put an end to trafficking. So welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was such a fun event we connected at, and it's just such a good conversation that we're having today. And I don't get to have it very often, so I'm very excited.
Can you begin by explaining a little bit more about Threefold and its mission?
Yeah, so Threefold is a B2B SaaS platform that helps fashion brands, apparel brands, get access to an ethical supply chain and training so they can grow their business for people, planet, and profit. So, as you mentioned, our platform allows brands to look at ethical factories all around the world. They can compare pricing, message them directly, and manage their production all in one place. And then our training for small brands and startups is business training. So you're learning how to pitch press and build wholesale and go into production and um, manage your marketing and branding strategy. So that you can grow your business. But then for larger established brands, it's sustainability seminars. So we're teaching, these big brands how they can start transitioning their current business model into a model that is more conscious, because they already do employ thousands of people and are beholden to shareholders. So they have to be very careful with every step they make that they're still able to stay in business while shifting to a more conscious model and supply chain, which a lot of the professionals I talk to are very passionate and interested in doing. They just aren't sure how. So we want to make that easier for them. So that's
Yeah.
why we're here.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think so much of that rings true really just for like our everyday lives in fighting these social justice issues and making more of like a conscious decision. I feel like sometimes it seems so insurmountable to make those big changes and like what is just my one habits going to do to affect that. But I love that there's companies like you and individuals like you that are really pioneering the way for that. So can you explain a little more like how Refold came to be?
Yeah. So my specific career background, I've worked for 10 years in the fashion industry in New York City. I have worked within PR, sales, and marketing, and have worked with hundreds of brands, big and small. And it was great because I got a really good understanding of the business of fashion and how it worked. And also a really great bird's eye view of just all of the very similar problems that brands go through to survive and be profitable and stay in business. And that was all great. And I had a moment where I was really starting to, I don't know, feel conflicted because I wanted my career to mean something. I loved fashion. I felt deeply called to it. But at the end of the day, kind of felt like I was just selling expensive stuff to rich people who were going to get sick of it.
Yeah.
And I was really starting to question like the purpose behind my career. And around that time, the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh happened. And I think it really awoke the world and the industry to the issues hidden in fashion supply chain. And it made me start thinking, bigger picture, like what could I do and what did that look like? And simultaneously, while I was going through this all personally, an opportunity presented itself for me to go on a trip to Zimbabwe, a mission trip to Zimbabwe.
Wow.
And it's an incredible trip. It was life-changing. The people were so joyful and generous and hardworking, and just had to make decisions like which grandchild they got to send to school. And
Mm.
it wasn't from a lack of effort, it was from a lack of opportunity. And it just really hit me very hard. And so I came back from that trip just very moved to create sustainable employment around the world, specifically in developing nations. And I wasn't sure how to do that, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. Um, so fast forward through a year of research and learning more and kind of figuring out, basically throwing ideas at a wall and figuring out what's stuck. I learned that fashion's the largest labor industry in the world, and a lot of our supply chain these days is in these developing nations.
Mm.
And it seemed to me to be the best opportunity to create change was through actual sustainable employment, employment that benefited the workers, that was safe for the workers. And so that's where I really started honing in on. And that eventually led me to India. And it was a research and development trip that I did there. And that's where I encountered these incredible factories who, on a small scale, they were employing women rescued out of sex trafficking, a small
Mm.
scale factory, and providing classes and financial training and job training, longer term career planning, housing. And India's largest manufacturing exporter I met with, and they have leading labor standards in the industry and daycare for their employees' kids and a
Wow.
machine that dyes denim with one glass of water. And I just was so overwhelmed by the incredible opportunity. However, what they all had in common were really poor websites. And so it was
Mm.
just obvious that it was going to be very difficult for somebody over here in America to just get on Google and get connected to these guys. And there wasn't really a good place for that to happen in one place. And so it just seemed very obvious to me that it needed to be a tech platform where
Mm.
someone could just find the right people for what they were trying to make and get connected and go. So that's where the platform came from, was that process.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think sometimes we think that, these problems of third world and developing countries, that we have no impact on it. But I think you actually told me when I met you about a website. I forget what the website is, a fair trade website where it asks, I think it's called like slaveryfootprint.org. And you take a little survey of like all of your habits and what you consume and kind of what foods you consume, what products you buy, and it tells you how many slaves are working for you from unfair and unethical trade. And so I took that, and 31 slaves technically are working for me. And we don't realize how our everyday decisions and the things that we consume have an impact on that. And the way that things currently are, there's no shame on us. I mean, it's kind of impossible, what I found, to not be kind of supporting slave labor because of the way the supply chain is set up. So I think that's so powerful to A, bring awareness that we are having an impact on that, and B, that you're making that bridge between the two, and creating a way for these bigger companies to kind of make that transition. So again, just kudos to you. That's really awesome. Can you go a little more detailed into how unethical fashion can actually support human trafficking?
Yeah, so I think it's a matter of understanding how I think the calendar that we're on as an industry for fashion impacts the supply chain from the manufacturing perspective. So, a lot of major brands, actually, probably every major brand you've heard of, does do their due diligence when they are looking for factories. It's a big, not security, but it's like a big insurance basically for them to make sure that where they are working is not a sweatshop, is not slave
Mm-hmm.
labor. So that's first tier, is what we call first tier of the supply chain. Where you're actually going to get more of the slave labor happening is in tier 2 and tier 3, which are not checked by the brands. And what these factories are is actually when fashion works in a cyclical model twice a year mainly, where it's fall, winter, and spring, summer, where we have a boost of, everyone needs a sweater and a jacket and a whatever, a scarf, and everyone needs a bathing suit. So you have these spikes in the industry where every brand is making a ton of production orders and the demand is really high. And so the orders are all coming in at the same time for every factory. And then throughout the rest of the year, it's a little slower. So what factories will do, and I don't necessarily discredit them for this, they keep the amount of employees that they can do in the slow seasons so that they don't have to lay off people when they have a busy season, and then they go into a slow season and they can't afford their whole staff. So they are trying to keep an even keel staff count that they can afford throughout the whole year. So then what happens is in these busy seasons, they can't handle the orders that they have coming in. And so they will work with a factory partner in their area, in their community, somebody they've been connected to help go through these orders and get the production out the door. This is not approved by the brands. It's often not discussed. It's just like, hey, I need help. Will you help me and do this order? That is where you're getting some of that supply chain slavery happening, because these tier 2 and tier 3 of the supply chain factories, they're not checked. They're often kind of patched together. They're not necessarily running up to standards with a business and an industry. And so that's where you're going to get more of that slippery slope of employment. So I think that's the first thing to really understand when you're thinking of how the way we operate as a business and as consumers and when we want things affects throughout the whole supply chain, all the way down to the lowest person on the totem pole of who's making this garment, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, what would it look like in a world where we were somehow able to regulate those second and third tiers? Like, what would that take?
I think it's going to take a lot of people. So it's going to take advocacy from governments, so local governments, not just the US, but Bangladesh and India and Vietnam. It's going to take local governments creating tax incentives for increased standards and criminalization of employing slave labor individuals. It's going to take transparency. It's going to take companies like that are working right now to use blockchain technology to track every step that your product, the apparel product that you're wearing, has gone through, every hand that it's passed in order to make that product. So that way you're seeing it from the fiber level where the textile was actually woven together and made, to when it was sewn together, to, you know, when it got to the brand in the States and was packaged or put together, whatever that was. They're working on blockchain technology to confirm the path that it's gone through, so that it's more trackable and traceable. And then I think figuring out from a brand perspective, both how are you accountable to that and making sure that you're tracking that and keeping your eyes on that, but then also how are you communicating that? We are seeing now more than ever consumers demanding brands meet the values that they have as a consumer, and they want to support brands who have those shared values. So how are you communicating the standards in which you're making your products to your consumer? It doesn't mean you have to be just an only all ethical brand. That's all you talk about. But is it there? Is it accessible? Can you talk about it? And how do you talk about it? So I think it's going to take a lot of different constituents to make it happen.
And this kind of leads to my next question, talking about the different blockchain technology. My next question is, what role does tech play in the fashion industry? Is that related, I'm guessing?
Yeah. So blockchain is Bitcoin. And basically to summarize it, because I'm also not a blockchain science or connoisseur or anything like that. So for the layman person like myself, who had to figure out what that was, is basically like if you had a stone tablet and every time the stone tablet moved to somebody else, you had to etch your name in it. So it's set in stone, right? So it is permanently cementing the path that it's gone through. So for Bitcoin, they're using that with money. So every time it gets transferred to someone else, it's etched into this stone. For supply chain, for fashion, it would be every part of the supply chain that product, that textile to product gets passed to, it's etched in stone. So it is cementing the path that it's gone through to go from fiber all the way to a product being sold.
I'm always like, the world of Bitcoin is always very elusive to me, but it's cool seeing how it can be used, like the benefits for really keeping companies accountable and having that transparency like you talked about.
I mean, and I also think too, like that's just to talk about tech a little bit more, like a lot of the innovations we're really starting to see in the industry is because of tech. So we're starting to see incredible innovations as science and tech partner together in textiles to be more sustainable. And so the science that's coming out with new textiles is cool, because you have to think about it. We've used the same textiles for generations, right? Cotton, silk, like leather. So they're learning how to grow leather from like mushrooms and algae, and they're using sour milk to spin silk, and they're using orange to do the same things. Like
Wow.
they're finding new ways to partner these tools that we have at our disposal in interesting ways that I just can't even fathom, because I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
And then from a tech perspective, for me, it's, it's connecting our global world. We are in a globalized economy, whether we want to be or not. The worms are out of the can, Pandora's box is opened. So we are all connected. And so because we are all connected and that is our reality, how do we be accountable to each other? How are we communicating that? What does that look like? And how can we use that as our superpower rather than currently where it stands, a potential problem? So how are we really utilizing that to everyone's benefit?
And also, what are some of the negative environmental impacts that the fashion industry has as it currently is? I mean, that's something that's talked about all the time, but until I actually started prepping for this interview, I had no idea really the extent of that.
Yeah, so there's still a ton of conjecture around the actual impact fashion has. There was a widely circulated fact about 5 or 6 years ago that fashion was the second largest polluting industry next to oil. That has been debunked. However, it is a large polluting industry. It's been studied that we as consumers, on an average, throw away 82 pounds of clothes per person every year. Most of the clothes that are made today are some blend of like polyester, which is plastic, which means that unlike if it was entirely silk or cotton, some kind of a natural fiber, it would decompose eventually. If your clothes, even if it's dirty underwear or socks that you're throwing away, or if you don't, recycle your clothes in any capacity, they're ending up in a landfill, it's plastic. And that plastic is not going anywhere. So understanding what you do when you're done with your clothes and where the impact you have and the responsibility you have as a consumer on that is one part. And then understanding from a factory level, we are using chemicals often to dye our clothes, and from the factory level. So the factories are using chemicals to dye the clothes and to process the clothes, to bleach the cotton, to clean everything. A lot of times that's going into the drinking water of the community because they're using the same river. And there used to be a very common understanding among production professionals in the fashion industry that if you ever want to know the upcoming trends in the fashion industry, go to China and look at the colors of the river. Because it's the color of the river. So it's understanding not only, what we really focus on heavily, which is the human component of our supply chain, but how our actions in the waste that we use and how we get rid of the waste and like what we do with all of the process that we're doing this, how is that actually affecting the people that are making the clothes? Because again, most of them are in developing nations. So we don't have as many clothes being made in America, in Europe as often as we used to. It is often being made in countries where, they're being hit by hurricanes, tsunamis. They're getting massive droughts and fires. And so it's all kind of accumulating. And so it's understanding all of that big picture mess and what we can do to try and suppress some of that.
Yeah, that's so important. And so I was looking more into the fair trade and what that even really means. The first thing I knew is that it doesn't support child labor or any kind of forced labor. Cycling back to what we were talking about before with like the second tier and the third tier and how things kind of get murky in there. And even though right now it's like hard to kind of have an impact on that, what we do have an impact in the United States in particular is how that everything we do and our demand and even the legislation that allows businesses to drive prices down so much to a point where these countries can't really keep up or they don't really have a fighting chance. What are some ways that as a country that's leading the free world, how can we at every different sector, like whether it's the legislative level or whether you're in the fashion industry, or what needs to change within the US in order to have that trickle down effect?
So many things. I think the biggest and easiest thing you can do right away, no matter who you are, is buy less and buy better. When you start learning what is going on within your closet and what all of this really means, I think a natural reaction to that is going, what have I been a part of? Oh my gosh. I would urge you not to just throw everything out of your closet, again, for the reasons I mentioned about landfill. There is a natural reaction when people discover sustainability that they want to purge everything and just only buy eco products and start over. However, that's the least sustainable thing you can do. So, you have your closet as is, but really checking yourself when you do buy something new, maybe even waiting 3 or 5 days. Like, do I really need this? Why do I
Mhm.
need this? Like, where does this fit within my wardrobe? How is this not solving something I currently have?
Mhm.
And so being very careful when you do purchase new. What can you buy secondhand? Is there an option for secondhand to keep that in the market, to keep that
Mhm.
product in the market? And then, buying better. So starting to educate yourself around different brands and that you can buy from. So I can confidently advise you not to shop from Forever 21. If you are on a budget and you don't want to do secondhand, um, specifically purchasing from the eco lines that some of these brands have. I know that some of those eco lines, like the H&M Conscious Collection, are controversial in my community because a lot of people see them as greenwashing. My interest with that is a lot more in the sense that if business heads at the tops of these companies are going to make decisions based on where the money is flowing and they see that consumers suddenly are only shopping their eco collection, what do you think they're going to do? They're
Mm.
going to transition more of their collection to that eco collection. So, buying less, but buying better.
Mm.
And understanding, I think, too, we've gotten into this very instant gratification culture. And so what I say when I mean buying less is really trying to gut check your conscious and really realizing, do I really need that thing, or is my habit as a consumer just
Mm.
to shop? A
Right.
lot of actually this year. One of the things I've been reading about as people have gone through crisis fatigue, your inner soul actually is seeking for a sense of control, and
Mhm.
one of the things that outputs as is shopping, because you
Wow.
feel a sense of control shopping, and not only that, but you tend to get a sense of joy
Mhm.
from getting a new purchase, right? So really, and I have to do this myself, is like checking, like, okay, do I really need this? Like, when and
Yeah.
where would I wear it? Especially right now when I'm going nowhere,
Right.
because that just impulse shopping right now that your body's trying to control and feel good about something,
Yeah.
is probably not something you really need. So it's like really starting to get honest with yourself and checking yourself. Is there a better option? Do I really need this? Can I shop secondhand? Things like that.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a reason why they call it retail therapy. It is like
Yes.
therapeutic in a sense, but there are benefits also, like you said, like we're not going anywhere right now. Like, do I really need this? What are your thoughts on a company like Rent the Runway, where you are not purchasing the items, but like I know they have subscriptions, but not those items are not necessarily all eco-friendly. So what are your thoughts on something like that? Is that solving the problem or perpetuating the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of these things, and I think you'll find anything in sustainability has a lot of gray area, and it is something that is argued over from a million different perspectives,
Yeah.
for good reasons, within sustainable fashion. I personally love Rent the Runway. I think for anybody that really is a fan of fashion, they love glitter, they love color, they love glam. Um, it is your creative outlet. So instead of buying a bunch of pieces that you maybe will only wear 10 times, um, you're renting it, so you're having fun, but you're putting it back into the ether for someone else to have
Mm,
fun with too. So I
yeah.
personally really like that model. I know that it is doing a lot of shipping, and shipping is a problem within our sustainable world, so it's not perfect, but
Mm,
I do think it's better than making an abundance of pieces that really will be dated and have a expiration date on them.
yeah.
One of the easiest kind of check yourself shopping guides is if you're going to wear this 30 times.
Mm,
And I think that that's once a week for a season.
mm,
And so thinking about like, will I really be wearing this? And how often, if so? I have fast fashion pieces like from H&M that I have worn for over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, because I
wow.
know how to take care of my clothes. I wash them well. I don't put them in the dryer.
Hmm.
Very few clothes of mine go in the dryer because it ages them.
Yeah.
I know how to mend things so that I can make sure that they stay in good condition. So, learning how to take care of your clothes and buying things that you're going to wear a lot, so that it's going to be well loved and, well cared for.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I think another thing that I found is like a gut check when I am purchasing things. And this comes actually from one of the women that is helping me with my human trafficking documentary. She said, like, you really have to start to deconstruct and critically think through things. Like, if I'm buying this shirt, and if I'm buying something that is so cheap,
Hmm.
how was it made? Who was
Hmm.
exploited in that process? Because there's just no way that it can be made for that cheap, really. So
Yeah.
that is something that really woke me up. And that's not just with clothes, that's with other items. That's why a lot of fair trade items like coffee beans and chocolate, and that's a lot of what you see. They are significantly more expensive, but there's a reason why. It's because everybody along the way has been paid a fair living wage. They've had checks to make sure that they're doing everything right for the environment. So just starting to like understand that. And for me, it's like just progress and not perfectionism, because there's no way that we're going to eliminate that from every part of our lives. But just if we all kind of take that first step, like you said, it's going to take a lot of people to make any kind of changes. So the other thing that I really loved, I actually watched your video like on Threefold, I think, when you guys were first getting started, and you guys talked about how the fashion industry has a very large potential to support women empowerment. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah. So, as I had mentioned briefly earlier, fashion's the largest labored industry in the world. It employs 1 in 6 people on the planet. And a large majority of the fashion industry is women. So, I mean, by those two facts alone, this is certainly not a quoted statistic, but to me, that absolutely makes us the largest place for female empowerment, globally. And so when you're thinking about, most of the industry, even here in the States and in Western Europe, is women. And then you think back to the supply chain, and a lot of these garment workers are women. It's, enabling them to, and I'm sure actually you guys have probably had conversations around this, but there have been many studies done from nonprofits that when you support a woman in the community, you are not just supporting her, but you are supporting the children in the community at large, because she makes sure her children are educated. She is supporting her neighbors. She is doing for her larger family what, $1 goes a lot further. There's a lot of study around
Mhm.
that. And so the same goes true. And the reason that we focus so much on creating jobs is because a lot of these areas, especially rural areas, not urban areas, it's a lack of job opportunity.
Mm.
And so when you are putting people in a position where they can't work for themselves, they're going to be vulnerable to really bad people.
Mhm.
And that's often, and this is what I think always breaks my heart when I read stories of exploitation, is often their only crime is that they were poor.
Yeah.
And so, what are you doing to create job opportunities so that they can have an opportunity to choose life on their terms, educate their children? You buy a pink sari or go to, like whatever the thing is,
Mhm.
like they should have the same freedom of life that we do.
Yeah.
And so it's creating those opportunities. That's what I deeply believe in, because it's allowing people to save money, to get educated, to provide for themselves, so that they are never victim to needing to find a job in another country that ends up exploiting them and trafficking them.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's what I think it really comes down to.
Yeah, and how can we create those opportunities for them? Is it supporting businesses that you know are giving those opportunities, or how what's a tangible way we can do that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's Good on You is a great app that rates brands, and it's also a great way to discover new ethical brands. The Done Good is another one, which is a marketplace as well as a Google Chrome extension that helps you shop and discover new brands. But yeah, I think following brands and supporting and shopping from brands who talk about supporting the supply chain. There's many brands that specifically work on people and the human trafficking component and wanting to make sure they're ending that exploitation one purchase at a time.
Mhm.
Um, if they're not talking about it overtly, there are brands that do have a bit about that in their about page on their website. So doing just
Mhm.
taking an extra 5 minutes to take a peek,
Mm.
and again, like pushing your dollars that matter, when you shopping where it's supporting teams who are doing the best they can to
Yeah.
be employing people in a way that is supportive, and they're doing their due diligence to make sure they're not creating more harm.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there anything else that you would want listeners to be left with? I think you've already given us so much great information and advice, but is there anything else that's on your heart that you want to share?
I think it's just, yeah, like you said, it's a journey. So not beating yourself up too much about past purchases or things you've done, and knowing that you're not still not going to be perfect moving forward, but doing the best you can to educate yourself and to shop better. If you are a brand, to come and work with Threefold, and I'm happy to connect you to other partners within the ethical, sustainable fashion space who can help you set up your
Mhm.
supply chain, market better, build your business more sustainably so that you are doing things like we've talked about today. Um, so that as the influencer that you are as a business leader, you are putting the metrics in place that you should be doing to make sure that you don't have exploitation in your supply chain. And I think just always doing your research and your due diligence around what these brands are doing and supporting where you see the good changes happening.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, how can people find you and Threefold? What's your social media or your website?
Yeah, so please follow us on Instagram. We have a lot of fun on there with insider conversations, like behind the scenes conversations like this, and fun facts and inspiration. So that's at Threefold, THR3EFOLD. I have fun talking about just being an entrepreneur and trying to build something that matters and makes a difference on my Instagram, which is at Jessica Kelly. But again, the threes are E's.
Mm.
Some branding synchronicity there. And yeah, go to threefold.com. My email's jessica@threefold.com. Happy to help you out if you're getting started, and need to go into product development and get your production going, and learn how to build your business for people, planet, and profit. I mean, I really am convinced that business is the greatest and fastest opportunity for us to create change and really work with people around the world to do that. So I'm very excited actually for what's to come.
Yeah, you're so amazing, Jessica. Thanks for all that you do in your business and also just for taking the time to sit down with me and to teach me and anyone else that's listening. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.